December 20th, 1964. Oakland, California. Behind the locked doors of a martial arts school, two men are about to fight a battle that will change the course of combat sports forever. One man claims it lasted 3 minutes. The other swears it was 25. One man says he won decisively. The other claims he held back to avoid committing murder. But here's what nobody talks about. The real winner of this fight wasn't the man left standing. It was an idea that would revolutionize combat forever and create the blueprint for every mixed martial artist you see today. This is the story of how Bruce Lee's greatest victory came from his most disappointing fight. San Francisco, 1964. The air tastes of salt from the bay and secrets from the old country. In Chinatown's narrow alleys, ancient traditions guard themselves like fortress walls. For centuries, the fighting arts of China have been passed down through bloodlines and sworn loyalties, never to outsiders, never to the Guai-Lo, the white ghosts. But 40 miles south, in Oakland, a 23-year-old rebel named Bruce Lee is shattering those sacred rules. His Junfan Gung Fu Institute doesn't care about the color of your skin or the country of your ancestors. If you can pay the $11 a month, you can learn the forbidden techniques of Wing Chun. This is heresy. This is revolution. And to the traditional masters of San Francisco, this is war. Bruce Lee has been in America for 5 years. Born in San Francisco, but raised in Hong Kong, he speaks perfect English with a slight British accent, a reminder of colonial rule. His American students call him Sifu, but his manner is nothing like the patient, mystical masters of old. Lee is electric, impatient. He strips away the elaborate ceremonies and gets straight to what he calls the art of fighting without fighting. But in San Francisco's Chinatown, the old guard is watching. The benevolent associations, secret societies that control everything from gambling to protection, consider Lee's actions a betrayal of sacred trust. The punishment for such betrayal has historically been swift and brutal. Enter Wong Jackman. Fresh from mainland China via Hong Kong, he represents everything the old masters revere: technical perfection, respect for tradition, and absolute loyalty to the ancient codes. Wong's northern Shaolin style is as different from Lee's Wing Chun as a ballet dancer is from a boxer. Where Lee is compact and explosive, Wong is fluid and graceful. Where Lee is direct, Wong is artistic. They're perfect opposites. The challenge comes on December 20th, 1964. Wong Jackman, acting as an emissary of the traditional schools, delivers a formal letter of challenge to Bruce Lee's Oakland school. The terms are medieval in their finality. If Lee loses, he must either close his school or stop teaching non-Chinese students. If Wong loses, well, Wong doesn't plan to lose. December 20th, 1964, 4:30 p.m. The Junfan Gung Fu Institute feels different today. The usual energy of students training has been replaced by something electric and dangerous. Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, sits in the corner with their infant son, Brandon. She's never seen her husband like this. Linda would later describe Bruce's demeanor that day as a controlled fury. He paced like a caged panther, shadowboxing, working through combinations. This wasn't just about pride. This was about the right to teach, the right to evolve, the right to break free from traditions that no longer served their purpose. Wong Jackman arrives with his witnesses. The exact number disputed. Linda remembers 13 people total in the room. Wong claims only 7, but everyone agrees on the tension. You could cut it with a blade. The confrontation begins not with violence, but with words. Wong's group speaks in rapid Cantonese, laying out their grievances. Bruce responds in English, a deliberate choice that draws a line in the sand. He will not conduct this business in the old language, by the old rules. As they prepare to fight, both men represent more than themselves. Wong Jackman embodies 5,000 years of Chinese martial tradition, the careful preservation of ancient knowledge, the respect for hierarchy, the belief that some secrets are too powerful for outsiders. Bruce Lee represents the future, the democratization of fighting knowledge, the evolution of technique through practical application, the American ideal that excellence should be available to anyone willing to work for it. They face each other in the center of the wooden floor. Wong's stance is wide, graceful, designed for the spinning kicks and acrobatic techniques of northern Shaolin. Lee's stance is narrow, economical, every muscle coiled for explosive forward movement. Fire and water. Tradition and revolution. East and west. What happens in the next few minutes, or 25 minutes, depending on who you believe, will echo through martial arts history for generations. But before we dive into the conflicting accounts of this legendary fight, we need to understand why the truth has remained buried for 60 years. In 1950, Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa created Rashomon, a masterpiece about how the same event can be remembered completely differently by different witnesses. Film critics call this the Rashomon effect. What happened between Bruce Lee and Wong Jackman is the perfect real-world example. Linda Lee Cadwell, Bruce's widow, has told her version countless times. Her account is vivid, detailed, and makes her husband look like an unstoppable force of nature. But memory is a storyteller, and stories change in the telling. According to Linda, the fight was over almost before it began. Bruce exploded forward with his signature chain-punching technique. Pak Sao, Lap Sao, straight blast, a relentless barrage that Wong simply couldn't handle. Within minutes, Wong was running, literally running away, with Bruce pursuing him around the room like a predator chasing wounded prey. But here's where Linda's account becomes truly dramatic. She claims that Wong's own supporters tried to intervene when they saw their champion being dominated. James Lee, Bruce's training partner, had to physically block them from helping Wong, shouting, "Let them fight," in English. The end, according to Linda, was sudden and decisive. Bruce caught Wong, took him down, and began what she describes as ground and pound, striking his grounded opponent until Wong verbally submitted. 3 minutes, total domination, case closed. Wong Jackman's version reads like it came from an entirely different universe. In his account, Bruce Lee was the aggressor, but not in a noble way. Lee attacked with street fighting tactics, going for the eyes, striking at the groin, techniques that violated the traditional codes of honor that governed formal challenges. According to Wong, he could have ended the fight quickly using his deadliest techniques. The Phoenix Eye fist that could stop a heart, or internal energy strikes that could cause delayed death. But he held back. Why? Because he was a gentleman warrior fighting a street thug, and he refused to lower himself to that level. But here's the most shocking claim in Wong's version. The fight didn't last 3 minutes. It lasted 20 to 25 minutes. For a quarter of an hour, two of the best martial artists of their generation went at each other with everything they had. And at the end, Wong claims it was a draw. William Chen, the most neutral witness, provides the most devastating contradiction to Linda's account. Chen was there representing the traditional schools, but he had no personal stake in the outcome. His testimony destroys the 3-minute fight narrative completely. According to Chen, the fight was long, grueling, and exhausting for both men. 20 to 25 minutes of continuous combat that tested not just technique, but conditioning, will, and heart. Chen's account supports Wong's claim about duration, but stops short of declaring a winner. So we have a 3-minute total domination versus a 25-minute war of attrition. We have Bruce Lee, the unstoppable force, versus Bruce Lee, the dirty fighter. We have Wong Jack Man, the coward, versus Wong Jack Man, the honorable warrior who held back his killing techniques. But there's one more piece of evidence that might help us understand what really happened. And it comes from an unexpected source. A newspaper challenge that Bruce Lee never answered. 3 weeks after the private fight, Wong Jack Man did something that would haunt Bruce Lee for the rest of his life. He placed a formal challenge in the San Francisco Chronicle, a public invitation for a rematch to be held in front of witnesses, with rules agreed upon in advance. This is where the story gets psychologically fascinating. If Bruce Lee had truly dominated Wong Jack Man as decisively as Linda claimed, why would Wong want a rematch? And more importantly, why didn't Bruce Lee accept? By 1965, Bruce Lee was already becoming famous. The Green Hornet television show would premiere the following year, and Hollywood was taking notice of his unique screen presence. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain from a public fight with an unknown traditional master. But there's another explanation that cuts deeper. What if Bruce Lee didn't answer the challenge because he knew the truth about what happened in that room? What if the real story was somewhere between the heroic version his wife remembers and the honorable defeat Wong claims? Let's consider a third possibility. What if the fight lasted closer to 20 minutes, as two witnesses claim? What if Bruce Lee did eventually prevail, but only after a grueling battle that exposed serious weaknesses in his fighting system? What if victory felt more like defeat? Linda Lee herself admits that Bruce was not satisfied with his performance. Even if he won, he was exhausted. His arms were swollen, and he was frustrated by how long it took to defeat an opponent he expected to handle easily. This isn't the reaction of a man who just delivered a 3-minute beatdown. Bruce Lee's post-fight analysis was brutal in its honesty. Wing Chun, the system he had mastered and taught with such confidence, had fundamental limitations. The sticky hands training that formed the core of Wing Chun assumed close quarters combat. But Wong Jack Man had refused to play that game. Wong's Northern Shaolin style emphasized mobility, distance management, and the ability to fight at long range. when your opponent won't come close enough for your close-range system to work. You have to chase them. And chasing an opponent around a room for 20 minutes while they pepper you with kicks and punches is exhausting, frustrating, and inefficient. But Bruce Lee's genius wasn't in winning fights. It was in learning from them. That night in Oakland, Bruce Lee, the Wing Chun traditionalist, died, and in his place, something entirely new was born. In the weeks following the Wong Jack Man fight, Bruce Lee transformed his entire training philosophy. The man who had once preached the purity of Wing Chun now became its harshest critic. Classical forms, he realized, were like learning to swim on dry land. Technically perfect, but practically useless in the chaos of real combat. Lee became obsessed with what he called aliveness in training. No more practicing techniques on compliant partners who moved in predictable ways. No more forms that assumed your opponent would attack in classical patterns. Everything had to be tested against resisting opponents who were trying to win, not following a script. Lee started reading everything he could get his hands on. Not just martial arts books, but boxing manuals, fencing treaties, even studies on animal movement patterns. He analyzed how Muhammad Ali used footwork to control distance, how fencing masters used timing to intercept attacks, how wrestlers used leverage to overcome size disadvantages. The conditioning problem that had exposed itself in the Wong fight became Lee's obsession. He had been technically superior, but physically exhausted. In future fights, he would be both. Lee added running, cycling, and weight training to his routine. Revolutionary concepts in the martial arts world of the 1960s, where many masters believed strength training would make you muscle-bound and slow. But the most radical change wasn't physical, it was philosophical. Lee began to formulate what would become Jeet Kune Do, which translates as the way of the intercepting fist. The name itself reveals the evolution of his thinking. Traditional martial arts taught block then counter, two separate movements. Lee's new approach emphasized interception, simultaneous attack, and defense. Why waste time blocking when you could strike the attacking limb while launching your own attack? It was more efficient, more direct, more economical. But JKD was more than just a technique. It was a complete philosophy of adaptation. Lee's famous motto became, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is specifically your own. This was martial arts heresy. Traditional systems demanded loyalty to the style. Lee demanded loyalty to effectiveness. Lee began seeking out fighters from other disciplines. He trained with Jean LaBelle, a judo and wrestling champion who would later become known as the godfather of mixed martial arts. He studied Western boxing with professionals who taught him footwork and hand combinations that traditional kung fu had never developed. He analyzed film footage of world-class athletes in every combat sport. This philosophical evolution would reach its culmination in Lee's most famous metaphor. Be like water. Water has no fixed form, but it adapts to any container while maintaining its essential nature. A martial artist, Lee argued, should be equally adaptable, capable of fighting at long range or close quarters, standing or on the ground, with hands or feet or improvised weapons. The implications of this philosophy extended far beyond martial arts. Lee was essentially arguing for the rejection of dogma in favor of pragmatic adaptation. Don't be limited by what you were taught if you can find something that works better. Don't preserve tradition for its own sake if innovation can save your life. Today, we call this approach mixed martial arts. Every MMA fighter is essentially practicing Bruce Lee's philosophy of absorbing useful techniques from multiple disciplines. The octagon validates what Lee learned in that Oakland schoolroom 60 years ago. The best style is no style, because real fighting doesn't respect artificial boundaries between systems. Here's the twist that changes everything. Bruce Lee didn't just win or lose the fight with Wong Man. He transcended it entirely by refusing to be bound by the limitations that the fight exposed. He created something that neither traditional kung fu nor any single martial art could offer. A system designed to evolve. Think about this. Wong Man spent the rest of his life perfecting the same Northern Shaolin techniques he used in 1964. He became a grandmaster of an ancient system, preserving traditions that were already ancient when his great-grandfather learned them. There's honor in that, but there's also limitation. Bruce Lee, by contrast, never stopped evolving. Every person he fought, every book he read, every physical limitation he discovered became fuel for innovation. The Bruce Lee who fought Wong Man in 1964 was already obsolete by 1965, replaced by a more complete, more adaptable version of himself. But here's the revelation that neither Bruce nor Wong could have seen coming. The fight would eventually make both of their approaches irrelevant. The future belonged not to traditional kung fu or to Bruce Lee's innovations, but to something neither man could have imagined: a completely scientific approach to human combat. Today's elite fighters don't just cross-train in multiple arts. They optimize every aspect of their performance using data, technology, and scientific methodology that would have seemed like magic to fighters in the 1960s. Modern fighters know exactly how many calories to consume, precisely how much force their punches generate, and can measure their reaction time to the millisecond. But this scientific revolution in fighting is built on the philosophical foundation that Bruce Lee laid in 1964. The idea that tradition should serve effectiveness, not the other way around. Every modern MMA fighter who discards techniques that don't work in favor of techniques that do is following Bruce Lee's template, whether they know it or not. The real winner of the Bruce Lee versus Wong Man fight wasn't determined in those 20 minutes in Oakland. It was determined over the following decades, as Lee's approach to martial arts influenced generation after generation of fighters, philosophers, and innovators who refused to be limited by the way things have always been done. Let's reconstruct those final moments using the most credible elements from all witness accounts. After 15 minutes of fighting, yes, 15 minutes, not 3, both fighters are feeling the effects. Wong Man's acrobatic northern style requires tremendous energy. Bruce Lee's relentless pressure demands perfect cardiovascular conditioning he doesn't yet possess. Wong has been using his mobility to avoid Lee's strongest weapons, the close-range chain punching and trapping techniques of Wing Chun. But constant movement is exhausting, and Lee's pressure is relentless. Every time Wong tries to create distance, Lee closes it. Every time Wong launches a long-range attack, Lee intercepts and counters. Here's what all witnesses agree on. At some point, Wong Jackman's back hits the wall. Whether he was driven there by Lee's pressure or backed himself there strategically, this moment changes the dynamic completely. Wong's mobility advantage disappears. Lee's close-range system suddenly becomes dominant. What happens next depends on which account you believe, but the physics are undeniable. In close quarters, against a wall, Wing Chun's rapid-fire hand techniques become devastatingly effective. Wong's high kicks and circular movements need space to work. Without space, he's fighting Lee's fight. Lee unleashes what his students would later call the straight blast, a technique he would refine over the following years, but was already devastating in 1964. It's not just punching, it's systematic destruction of the opponent's ability to mount any defense. Wong Jackman, pressed against the wall and overwhelmed by Lee's close-range assault, makes a decision that will haunt his reputation for decades. He turns and moves rapidly along the wall, trying to escape the pocket and regain fighting distance. This is the moment that creates two completely different narratives. To Lee's supporters, Wong is running away, confirming their fighter's dominance. To Wong's supporters, this is intelligent, tactical movement, regaining position against an opponent who has abandoned honor for street fighting brutality. But Bruce Lee doesn't let him regain that distance, moving with the explosive forward pressure that would become his signature. Lee pursues, catches Wong, and brings the fight to the ground. What happens on the ground is where this story reaches its climax, not because of who wins, but because of what Bruce Lee realizes about himself. According to the most credible accounts, Wong Jackman submits, either verbally or by his body language clearly indicating he's finished. Bruce Lee has won, but as he stands up, breathing heavily, arms swollen from exertion, looking down at his defeated opponent, he doesn't feel victorious. He feels frustrated, exhausted, unsatisfied. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In his mind, he should have dominated quickly and decisively. Instead, he's been pushed to his limits by an opponent he expected to handle easily. The victory belongs to Bruce Lee, but the lesson belongs to both fighters and to the future of martial arts itself. December 20th, 1964. The fight is over. The witnesses have gone home to tell their different versions of the same story. Wong Jackman returns to San Francisco to continue teaching traditional Northern Shaolin. Bruce Lee locks up his Oakland school and drives home to Linda and baby Brandon, his mind already racing with plans to revolutionize everything he thought he knew about fighting. Neither man could have predicted the ultimate consequences of their 20-minute battle. Wong Jackman would spend the next 54 years perfecting and preserving the traditional arts, becoming a respected grandmaster who maintained the old ways until his death in 2018. His dedication preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Bruce Lee would spend the remaining 9 years of his life pursuing the opposite approach: constant evolution, relentless innovation, and the systematic deconstruction of artificial boundaries between fighting styles. His influence would eventually reshape not just martial arts, but concepts of personal development, physical fitness, and philosophical adaptation to change. Today, every mixed martial artist who steps into the octagon is validating the lesson Bruce Lee learned in that Oakland school. The best style is no style. The most effective technique is whatever works. The greatest tradition is the willingness to abandon tradition when it no longer serves effectiveness. But here's the final twist in this story. The debate over who won the Bruce Lee versus Wong Man fight is still raging 60 years later. New witnesses occasionally surface with new details. Old witnesses change their stories or reveal information they've kept secret for decades. The truth remains elusive. And maybe that's exactly as it should be. The fight that created Bruce Lee's greatest innovation wasn't meant to have a clear winner. It was meant to have consequences. It was meant to force evolution. It was meant to prove that the most important victories aren't won in the moment of conflict, but in the years of growth that follow. The Junfan Kung Fu Institute is long gone. The building that housed it has been demolished and rebuilt. Wong Man is dead. Bruce Lee has been dead for 50 years, but the idea they fought over, whether martial arts should preserve tradition or pursue effectiveness, continues to evolve. So, who won the secret fight that created a legend? Bruce Lee won the battle, but more importantly, the principle he discovered in that victory changed the world. Sometimes, the greatest triumph isn't beating your opponent. It's learning something that makes you unbeatable by anyone, including your former self. And that lesson extends far beyond martial arts. In business, relationships, creative endeavors, anytime we cling to methods that no longer serve us, we're choosing tradition over effectiveness. Bruce Lee's victory over Wong Man wasn't just about fighting. It was about the courage to evolve